Hey, hello, I'm Kråkan, also known as Corvus Cornix, and welcome to Yacc, yet another Crowcast where I pick a game, I play it for a week, and then I'll talk about it. This week's game is Castlevania Symphony of the Night. It was originally released for the Sony PlayStation in 1997, but the way I played was with the Requiem collection for the PlayStation 4 and 5, released in 2018. This game was developed by Konami and published by Konami, and also there will be spoilers up ahead, just so you know, but first a little backstory. So this game I got on release. It was recommended to me by a dear friend of mine called Richter, or he's also go by the name Firebrand on Twitch. So I played this game a lot and just put it down, and I recently picked it up because it's a good game to play. So the game starts out 1792, and it's a cutscene with a dark castle rendered in full 3D, bats and dramatic music and stuff, typical Castlevania style. And the game starts out, you're Richter Belmont, you're playing the final battle from Rondo Blood, which is also on the Requiem collection, by the way. So you whip Dracula in the head with your whip, and until he basically goes down. This boss has two forms, one of the classic Cape Dracula and Big Beast bat thingy. So another thing that is different from the different versions of the game is that the PSP version, I believe, and the PlayStation have different voice acting, but no matter which version you play, it's cheesy regardless. You probably heard that famous quote with Dracula and what is a man and all that stuff. But I actually prefer the PlayStation take on this voice acting, but the one we got with the Requiem was the PSP version, I believe. So I don't think you can lose this battle, because if your health drops down to a certain point, Maria will step in and lend her her powers. But Richter has a couple of tricks up his sleeves without Maria's help, so if you press X and down, you do like a slide. It's useful to avoid his jumping bat forms attacks. And then you have the special attack with the sub-weapon, you press triangle, and then you have your normal whip attack, which is a square, and then you have the square and up, which is the sub-weapon. And in this case is the holy water, and his special is the Hydrostorm. It deals a ridiculous amount of damage. So once Dracula is beat, the whole screen turns into a photo that's, one of those old Polaroid photos, and it gets turned, lit on fire. It's a really cool effect, almost like a Mode 7, if that makes sense. So after this battle, Richter disappears and Maria goes to look for him, and even later, so 4 years I believe, you play as Dracula's son, Alucard, and he's like half vampire, half human, which is a kind of an interesting combination. I believe it's called a Dampier. And he enters the Castle Dracula to deal with his dad and find Richter. So right off the bat, pun intended, Alucard is a powerhouse. He more or less one-hit KOs everything in this first area of the castle. That is until he runs into the boss character of Death, which basically tells him to leave. But of course Alucard refuses, and Death steals all of his gear, so he's left with his bare fists. So this game is a light RPG. You have these stats called Strength, Constitution, Intelligence, and Luck. And you pick up items as you go and explore the castle. And you, more or less at the end of the game, you have so many options to choose from how to deal with enemies that it's ridiculous. This game can easily be broken, but it's kind of nice just giving you all these options to do whatever you want. Here's like your playground. So the first useful item that I found was the short sword, and it's marginally better than the fists. So this game coined the phrase Metroidvania, and you explore a map. You bring up the map by pressing the middle bar button, and you know exactly where you are at any given time. It's really, really useful actually. So the map looks like a Metroid map. So on this map you have these red rooms, which are the save rooms that will. Basically, Alucard goes into a coffin and it spins a bit, so you can save the game, or you basically heal up and your magic gets refilled as well. The second item that I found was the Cube of So, and it basically, when you hit a candle or like a destructible object, it doesn't do anything, but when you pick up the Cube of So, it will actually spawn an item from broken like candles and stuff, just like other Castlevania games. Is really useful, and in this game you also collect money, and the money is used for a specific area in the library where you talk to a librarian. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but it's always good to have a lot of money on your person, and most enemies drop money bags just like any Castlevania game. The only different thing is that in the older Castlevania, the money was just for score, but in this case, it's actually used as currency. And also another thing that I forgot to tell, but it's called Metroidvania for a reason, this genre, and it borrowed a lot from Metroid in itself. So there are a lot of similarities. I think even the design team blatantly said like, well, that's exactly what we took inspiration from. It's not a bad thing. It's actually, I think they made it better than Super Metroid in some cases. So another useful ability that Alucard has is the backdash. So if you press triangle, he does this backdash, and if you tap it really fast, he moves faster. So it's a lot. It's kind of ridiculous, but you after a while you start getting tired of moving from room to room, and backdashing is actually a little bit faster than walking. You can combine this with like a shield combo, like you press up the shield and you actually move even faster. So this kind of ridiculous thing. I watched a couple of speedruns this week, and how I hate backdashing, but I know that it's useful to move faster. But every time I was like, oh, you save a couple of seconds here and there, and you use that the backdash ability. So right before the first boss, you can find some hidden rooms, and this is a nice thing that Castlevania did. There are these hidden rooms that aren't displayed on the map, so you can break certain walls by hitting it with your fist or sword or whatever weapon you have, and it will break and you'll find hidden goodies. So you can find a magical upgrade and a max heart, which increase your magic and, well, overall health. The game also keeps tracks of how many rooms you have been in, and also how many enemies you killed. And there is a thing tied to a trophy, I believe. It's not really a secret, but once you beat the game once, the castle turns upside down and you have to explore it again. So the trophy is tied to exploring the map 100% and then doing it again. But technically, I think it's like a 200.4 or 200.6% exploring. It's a little bit tedious to cover like the entire map because it's a little finicky, but it's a nice thing that game actually keeps tracks of how many rooms you've been in and where you've been and explored. So in this game you will also find money, gold bags, you will get abilities through wearing different kind of rings, armors, capes. There are also sub-weapons that Alucard can use, like holy water, crosses, axes, daggers. It's a book, the holy book I believe it's called, and the prisma, which is this projectile that bounces all over the place. Then you have the stopwatch, which freezes some enemies in a certain time. It's also used for a specific place where you open up a hidden path in a what do you call it, a clock room. And then you have, I believe it's like a salt, but the icon is kind of funny because it's like a hand you're sprinkling salt, and I didn't know exactly what it was at first, but it's, yeah. And most of these sub-weapons have like an extra powerful version of themselves. Like the cross has this swirling effect with lots of crosses. It takes a lot of hearts, which is the ammunition that drives these attacks. You also have the Hydrostorm from the holy water, and so on. So not for long I ran into a door with a blue barrier that I couldn't pass. So this ability will be found in the library. So you buy this thing off the librarian, which basically opens up the blue doors. That's it. So I was forced to go another way, and I ran into the first boss, which is this bird creature with a spear and a bat. So the bat creature lifts up this bird and drops him down on you, and you avoid him and you whip him and you use whatever you have at your disposal to take him out. And once the bird is gone, you go for the bat, and the bat kind of spits these fireballs, and once you beat him, you get a max heart and you continue on exploring the castle. And then I went through the marble gallery. I picked up some holy water. I found Maria, now a young woman, because in the previous time when you saw her in the Richter fight, she was a young girl. Now she's much older. So you meet her in this room called the clock room, and she pretty much is looking for Richter. That's about it, and she dismisses you and leaves. So there's a long corridor where you run into a bunch of enemies, and the most annoying enemy in the game, I believe, until you get like anti-petrification. It's a plant that spits seeds at you, and if you get hit by these seeds, you don't take any damage, but you turn into a statue. And I believe you can use the shield pressing the circle button, but it doesn't always work for some reason. So I don't really have a good tactic. Sometimes it's useful to like backdash, because then you will avoid the seeds when it's spawning on screen, if that makes sense. But there's a little fun little Easter egg. If there's a small little percentage, if Alucard gets hit by the seed, he can turn into a vampire gargoyle statue instead of his petrified stone self, which is kind of cool because he is technically a monster in disguise, just like his father. So on your way to the library, you will pick up the transform into a wolf ability. And the wolf is a little bit faster than Alucard. The wolf can also swim, but later in the game you will unlock these abilities that are tied to these transformation, and the wolf can basically turn into it's a bad reference, but a bullet train. You can run into anything. The other abilities or transformations you can get are bats, and you can turn into mist, and even later on poisonous mist, which is useful because the mist is needed to cross to certain bars, and the bat ability breaks the game in my opinion because you can fly everywhere. And there's also another ability that you unlock with the bat. It's you spit like a firebolt. It's kind of cool because this game has so much depth that it's super deep. So you do this like fireball with the bat. You do like a sweeping motion on the D-pad, just like in a fighter game, and I believe that's a brilliant thing. But another funny thing that happened this week was I forgot how to turn into a wolf. And it's embarrassing to say, but you just press the L1 button. I had to Google it and find out how to do it. It was kind of embarrassing, but there's also these... I mean, I can't be blamed for it because this game is so deep. It even has a magical system where you press in D-pad combinations and stuff, just like a fighting game, to throw away spells. And if you know the spells, you can just use them right off the bat. And you don't have to buy them in the library, which is kind of cool. So I believe in some drawer I have like a hand-drawn kind of map of all the spells, but I couldn't find it. But another good thing to have when playing this game, and I forgot to mention at the beginning, is that you need a map for this. So I went online and printed out 2 maps. And it's useful when you're looking for certain items because this castle is full of stuff that you want to find. It's one of those things, you need better armor, you need capes, you need rings, you need to find all of these good gear. I printed up a map of the regular castle and the upside down castle. Even if I didn't make it that far, it's nice to have this maps because it reveals all the secrets, and if you're looking for something in particular, it's a good thing to have. So you can also pick up these familiar cards, and they range from devil, fairies, and swords and bats, and they are basically companions that press buttons and help you out. I think the fairy can sing to you, and also it's like an auto filling potions. You don't have to take a potion. So normally when you want to use an edible, that sounds weird, but use a potion or something that will recover your health or whatever, you equip it to your hand and you toss it on the ground, and then you can eat it. So you can pick up wall meat, which is this Castlevania meat, I guess. You can find like a tea set, egg and ham, and all these kind of... This game is jam-packed with stuff, and I get excited talking about it because, as I said before, this castle is full of hidden goodies to explore and find. Another familiar card is the sword, and the sword is this floating sword that attacks enemies, and it's very useful. So most of the familiar abilities help you in some way. I believe the sword is the better one, and I think the companions or the cards actually level with you, depending on how many they kill and so on screen. That's at least the idea of the sword. So a useful ability that you can pick up early in the game is the Spirit Orb, and it basically shows how much damage you're dealing to that particular enemy, and I believe it also shows the name of it. And specific enemies has this rare chance of dropping a specific item. Like example, maybe a zombie drops like a special cape or cloth, while like a goblin or something drops potions. So if you want to farm a certain item and you don't have money, you go for that. So another useful ability that Alucard will pick up later in the game is the holy symbol. So Alucard is a Dhampir, so he's half human, half vampire, so he takes damage from water. So if he gets the holy symbol, he won't take damage and he can just go through the water. He actually walks on the bottom of the bed, the water bed, if that makes sense. But the funny thing about this ability is that it's just a snorkel, like a breathing straw like divers have. I don't know, I'll find that funny. He's just putting in a snorkel in his mouth and all of a sudden he's immune to the effect of water. I don't know, it's kind of ridiculous but funny. And also you can put in these codes. So when you start up a new game, you're prompted to select a name. So if you put in a There are a couple of codes that I know of. You can play as Richter, you can play as an axe armor, which is not recommended, and you can put in a hard mode to make the game even harder, which is, don't do that. And then you have the bosses. I'll mention a few of them. You have the doppelganger, which you meet on early on, which is a copy of you, and he basically has like the same things that you have at the beginning, so you want to learn his patterns and take him out. So it's not that hard once you get the pattern down. Another boss is the Skilla, which is this wolf woman with tentacles and snakes. So there's a way to cheese this boss if you get up behind her, so then she can't hit you. Then you have Legion, which is this human ball of corpses, and it's kind of disgusting, I'm not gonna lie, but a good way to beat this boss is having the Hydro Storm and just go underneath it or beside it and just use it. It clears a chunk of this ball and makes short work of him. And then you have Death itself. It's not that hard of a boss actually. And then you have Cerberus, the three-headed hound dog from hell. Not too bad either. You stand on the platform and throw holy water at him, and occasionally jump down and hit him with your whip. Or not whip, what should I say? Your weapon, your sword. And then you have the Lord of Flies, which is a big corpse with flies, which is also kind of disgusting. Then you have the succubus, and this fight is, a succubus basically poses Alucard's mother, and it turns into a boss fight. And then you have the final boss, which is Dracula, and I believe he's fused to his throne. There's a really way to cheese this boss. There's a broken sort of item in the game called the shield rod. So if you have, you perform a certain button combination, and depending on what shield you have up at the time, it will grant you a different ability with that shield. So if you have Alucard shield and you have the shield rod and you perform this thing, I believe you just put up the shield and walk right into it, and you deal a lot of damage, and I think you also get healed by it, so it's kind of ridiculous. I remember getting the trophy for beating Dracula, and the PS4 does this thing. This was back when I didn't have a PS5, and this is how I played it with this week on the PS5. So when you get a trophy on the PS4, it takes a screenshot of that exact moment when that trophy pops. So it has me having the shield up, dealing a lot of damage, and it's kind of embarrassing to have that actually, because I wanted to beat him legit, but it turned out to be too hard for me, so I cheesed it all the way. So the final thing I want to talk about is the good and bad ending. So if you go to the throne room in the regular castle, you encounter Richter. So you can defeat him, and that will bring you the bad ending. But if you have holy glasses, I believe, you can see this floating orb, and you will realize that he's being controlled by it. So if you destroy the orb, Richter will... You basically part on good terms, and you will enter this room where the castle is flipped upside down, and this is where the exploring part begins, because now the castle is upside down. You have to explore everything again. And that final boss of the game is Dracula, and before that I believe you take out the puppet master himself, Shaft, which is a ridiculous name, but he was the guy that somehow manipulated Richter to begin with. So I will not spoil the game more, because I've spoiled enough already. So gameplay: explore the castle, find all the secrets, upgrade yourself, and beat Dracula in the end. Control: D-pad moves Alucard around. I believe the left stick does as well. You jump with the X button. You use your weapons with the square button. The circle button will bring up your shields. Triangle does the slide dash thingy. The middle bar brings up the map, and options brings up the startup screen, where you can see all the stats and everything, like an RPG sheet. Like if you ever played D&D, that's what it looks like. Graphics. So when people started to get into 3D, because this game was made in 1997, 2D was more or less abandoned and 3D was the new thing. Castlevania kept the 2D style intact, but they use sparingly some 3D effects. It's like the coffin, for example, in the save rooms as a 3D effect, and some of the books in the library are 3D made, and some backgrounds are parallax scrolling 3D effects, but looks really cool. And the sprite work on Alucard and the enemies is fantastic. It's really well and polished, and it's a great looking game. And also another thing, Ajami Kojima made a concept art for this game, and it's absolutely beautiful. It has this feminine touch, even for characters like Alucard, and I can't make it justice, so go look it up. Sound and music. Machiru Yamane made the music for this game. It's amazing. It doesn't even have a single bad track. Dance of Pails is a favorite of mine. Lost Paintings, Prayers, and the Marble Gallery sticks out. So I thought this was on Spotify, but for some reason it isn't. So it's on YouTube, so go have a listen. As I said, not a bad track. Easter egg, secrets, and glitches. So there's a lot of references in this game. One of them that I found was an Alice in Wonderland reference. There is a scarecrow, a thin man like an axe machine that rolls on wheels, and a lion in one area. That's one of the references. So there was this other thing. At the bottom of the outer wall section, there is a bird's nest. So if you walk in and out of the rooms a couple of times, certain things will happen. So this is tied to a trophy. So you walk in the room and this bird lands on this nest and eventually would lay some eggs. And the eggs will hatch and the birds will be fed by the bigger bird and they will grow up and eventually leave the nests. This was one of those things that I was like, why is this in this game? Well, it's a funny little thing. And the animations of these small little animals, I believe they're seagulls, is actually kind of cute. In conclusion, I wrote, yes, play it. It's amazing. The music, the graphics, the control are more or less flawless. On the negative end, this game suffers from that classic Castlevania knockback, and I hate that. It doesn't need to be in here. Another thing that you might want to have is a printed out map, because it's easier to find stuff and whatnot. And the in-game map is good, but it doesn't show all the hidden goodies. So that's, if you're exploring the castle, you just want to have some fun, print out a map, make the experience much more fun. This game is easy to pick up, but hard to master. There is so much depth in this game. You can make a run while just using magic, and you have another one where you just do sub-weapons, and another one where you just go like traditional weapons and abilities, or you can mix and match. The hard part is getting into it all. There's a lot of, as I said, depth to it. That's the only negative thing I can say about the game, but once you get into it, it's a super awesome game that everyone should play. So anyway, thanks for listening and or watching, and take care.